Welcome to Wellsprings of Faith. My name is Father Jürgen Liias. I am a Roman Catholic priest. I'm a senior priest on the staff of St. Patrick's Stonehame and our neighboring community. Our program comes from Melrose, Massachusetts. And our program, Wellsprings of Faith, is about religious faith, the journey of faith, and the fruit of that faith in a person's life. Today I want to welcome to our program a new friend and an associate. Diane McCarthy is the new pastoral associate at St. Patrick's Stonehame, and it's been wonderful to have you join us on the staff there.
Thank you, Father.
Praise the Lord. As I said, this program is primarily about one's own journey in faith, so you are welcome to go as far back as you remember. I've had people go back in utero. Not that they remember, but there's sometimes a significant part about even their conception. Mm-hmm. But talk about your own journey in faith to Christ.
Sure, thank you. So I'm a cradle Catholic. I lived in Stonehame my whole life until about 8 years ago when I moved to Woburn.
So did you grow up at St. Patrick's then?
I did.
That was your parish?
It was my parish. I received all my sacraments except my baptism. I was baptized at St. Clement's in Medford. Medford, Somerville, where my parents were from Somerville.
I see.
And then my children also received all their sacraments at St. Patrick's.
So that really is your spiritual
It is my spiritual home. Yes.
Yeah, I've learned being a new Catholic that where you have your sacraments, that's where your records all are. And that's sort of your sacramental home, even if you wander all over the world.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I participated in the youth group at St. Patrick's when I was in high school, and for a fleeting moment, there was a wonderful religious sister there at the time, Sister Ann Carver, and also a priest there, Father Jack Crowley, and a woman who ran religious ed, Maureen McMahon. And
good to remember all these things from your childhood.
Well, I was in high school.
And still, I'm not sure I can remember the whole staff of my church.
Well, they were really, they played a significant role in my faith journey, especially, well, actually all three of them. But so for a fleeting moment in high school, very fleeting, I thought about becoming a religious sister because of Sister Ann's influence. But not being as grounded in the faith as I am now, it was really fleeting. Like, it came in and it went out really quickly. I was like, no, I want to be married and have a family. And so I didn't really discern it properly. So I ended up, I went to college and...
Just back to before you leave your high school era, what were some of the things you remember that kind of touched you or affected you or even made you have that fleeting thought? I mean...
So I can remember one time we had a mass in the basement of the old school at St. Patrick's, which still is in use. Yeah. And we only had candles for light. And it was so intimate, and you could really feel, Jesus there and the Holy Spirit. And so it was those kinds, and seeing the vibrance of their faith, all of those people, was it really touched me. So, and we also we did a trip to Mount Monadnock, and we hiked the mountain and saw the sunset, and it was the community that was really important, and was very edifying. And so then I did end up going on to college, and my undergraduate degree is in medical technology.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Merrimack.
Merrimack?
Yep.
Good Catholic school?
Yep. Yeah. And I am actually back at Merrimack now doing a certificate program in spiritual direction.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's kind of come full circle.
Okay, we'll have to hear about that in a little while.
But so I had this real interest in science. I always loved science. I often think, maybe I should have gone to medical school, but at the time I just wasn't really thinking in that. So I found a job that kind of helped me to, so that I could work with my love of science and biology and stuff like that. So I was a lab technician for about 20 years. And I liked that job. When I first started, it was really kind of, it was back in the 80s, and we had a lot of patient contact, which I really liked. When I stopped doing that work, which was probably in the early 2000s, we had much less patient contact.
Why
and
was
then
that?
it became more specialized. So when I started, you were kind of like a generalist. You drew the blood, and then you went down to the lab and you did the tests, and you kind of followed people's cases, and you knew patients, outpatients who were coming in, oncology patients, and you were rooting for them to
So
do
there
well,
was
and
a real relationship with the
Yes,
patients, not
yes.
just with their blood or their urine or whatever you have
Right,
to do in the
right.
lab. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to the point where, basically I was just in the back of the lab the whole time, like just putting tubes of blood on a machine, and I said, this isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while my kids were growing up, I took a part-time job in the school department in Stonehame. I worked in special education just as a secretary. I shouldn't say just as a secretary, and I learned a lot about special ed. Worked with some great people, had relationships with the students, because my office was in the high school, and my desk was right at the door. So when the kids were passing, and especially when my kids were students there, all their friends would be like, "Hi, Mrs. McCarthy," and then I had candy on my desk, and so people would come in, and kids would come in.
Yeah, that could be a lure.
Yeah. And sometimes kids would come in and just sit and talk to me about, whatever was going on in their life, and I really enjoyed that. So I did that job, and then.
Again, not to move forward too, but what was your? I mean, did you continue? You said your kids were sacramentalized there and all that, so I assume you continued. Did you ever have, particularly as someone interested in science, a lot of people kind of have this antithesis between faith and science, and they say, I don't believe in religion, I believe in science. Did you have those kind of quandaries or not?
Not at that time, no. I didn't. I wasn't, at the time I wasn't really questioning.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed in that God has given me the gift of a very strong faith. So I didn't question so much then. And maybe to a certain extent, I believed that they could be in balance. Faith and reason could be in balance. And then, when I went on in my theological studies much later in life, I realized that absolutely that's how it works. But so then when my kids are starting to go off to college, and I'm thinking, okay, this isn't, not that I didn't love the work. I've always loved everything I've done. I really have. And I've done a lot of different things. I worked at a bank when I was in college. I worked at the old Stonehame Cinema, which was one of my favorite jobs because I could eat all the popcorn I wanted. But I said, this isn't really, I'm not going to stay in the school department forever. It was just a way for me to be on my kids' schedule and stuff like that. So then I started questioning, what am I going to do? And kind of was open to, even though I probably did intentionally pray about it, but I was also open to God's guidance in what would I do next, And then I had a couple of personal experiences, medical experiences, that with people in my family that kind of led me this one particular way. So first, I had a great aunt who was diagnosed with oral cancer, and she was very close to my family. And so people always would look at me as like the medical expert, in the family. Until my sister-in-law became a nurse, I was the medical expert. And so I was trying to help my aunt access the things that she was going to need when she went home after her surgery and things like that. And I kind of understood, what they were talking about. And so through that experience, I was like, oh, maybe I'd like to do medical social work, because I was helping her to arrange, okay, she needed certain equipment at home and things like that. And so I started exploring that. I think Salem State has a great medical social work program. So anyways, I was doing research and things like that. And then about 4 months later, my dad was like perfectly healthy one day, 74-year-old, driving to Rockingham to go to the races, one of his favorite pastimes, and he pulled off the highway because he got this really like excruciating headache.
Oh.
And so, kind of a long story short, he ended up having a really devastating stroke.
Oh.
And because he was so healthy one day and so sick the next day, when I got to the hospital and I saw that he was having trouble breathing, I said to the doctor, well, let's give him some airway support, let's. And he said, you want me to put him on a ventilator? And I said, yeah, yes. And not knowing at the time how serious the stroke was. So they put him on a ventilator, and he lived for another week in the hospital. But through tests that they did, and he never regained consciousness. So, so I was there with my mom, and we are a strong Catholic family, and so the doctors were talking to us about withdrawing the ventilator. And so my mother and I were like, well, is that something we can do? As Catholics, can we do that?
Yeah.
Or do we just have to keep him on the ventilator, for an indefinite amount of time? So the chaplain at the hospital came and talked to us. And the chaplain happened to be a Catholic priest. And he was so helpful in teaching us, what the church actually says about extraordinary means of life support and when it makes sense to withdraw support and when you can't. And this was a case that we could.
Good.
And so after that experience with the chaplain, I said, that's what I want to do. I said, not medical social work. This is what I want to do. I can combine my love of science and medicine with my strong faith and come up with, it obviously wasn't, I always say this when I'm telling my story, I combined my love of medicine with my love of, with my love of my faith, like it was all up to me, right? Obviously it was God. But I was open to it. And so then I started exploring, well, what do I need to do to become a chaplain? And so I found out that I needed to get a master's degree in ministry or theology, which I did through, and I would love to give a plug right now to the St. John Seminary Master of Arts in Ministry program. They also have a Master of Theological Studies program, and it's actually, you get your diploma from the seminary, and it's a program for lay people so that they can go out and work in the church, work in the church or other areas. But a lot of the people that I went to school with are now pastoral associates or religious ed directors or music ministry or whatever, and they have the great educational background to help them to do that work for the church. So I did that, and then after that, after I got the degree, then I had to look for clinical pastoral education so that I could become a certified chaplain.
Right.
So
that's still going on. I remember I had to go through that at seminary.
Yes.
CPE, we call it.
Right. Yep. And I had seminarians in some of my units, and or lay people that just. It's funny because when I finally, so I went through CPE, I got certified as a chaplain, and after that I worked in Catholic long-term care for about 5 years, so in 2 different nursing facilities. And whenever I would go to visit somebody and identify myself as the chaplain, people would automatically assume that I was a religious sister. Because how could you be a chaplain if you weren't a sister, you know? And because there's a lot of...
in the olden days, that was true, right? But
in the olden days, it was religious sisters, or it was priests, or religious.
There weren't many people like you, lay chaplains.
Right. So it just, I would just have to do a little education and, let them know that, I was legitimate and everything. And so I did that work. I did that work for a while, and then after that, I mean, it's like quite a journey from Stoneham Cinema to St. Patrick's Parish.
Interesting to read your resume.
Yeah.
And see all the.
Yeah, I had to stop putting things on my resume. It's getting too long. But then I was hired by the Archdiocese of Boston to be a parish educator was my title in the Initiative for Palliative Care and Advanced Care Planning. So what the initiative was it was something that was started by the Archdiocese in response to the attempts in the legislature to legalize physician-assisted suicide.
Oh yes, I remember that first, because we're in the middle of that again. But
exactly.
That first time around was, how many years ago was that?
It was 2012,
yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah, that sounds about. It was about the time I myself became a Catholic in 2012.
Yeah.
So I remember it was early on that I became aware of the legislative thing and the campaign of the Archdiocese to oppose the legislation permitting euthanasia.
Yeah, in 2012 there was a ballot initiative.
Yes, right.
And everybody thought that it would pass, and it didn't. It was defeated. It was a narrow defeat. I think it was 51-49. But so because of that, and because of the fact that the bishops knew that this wasn't going to go away, that they were going to keep trying to legalize it, maybe by a different route, the initiative was born. And so my job was to travel to parishes and to talk to them about what's palliative care, what is advanced care planning, what does the church actually teach about these things? Because there were times when I was working in the nursing home, and we'd go in for a care plan meeting, and maybe the subject of hospice would come up, and somebody would say to me, well, my loved one can't go on hospice, we're Catholic. And
really, they just say something like that, assuming there was a contradiction of conflict.
Right, because because their thoughts about hospice were associated with large doses of morphine, which would, be, a premature demise for their loved one, kind of thing. And so then I had, so basically I was educating people.
Obviously, we don't have time for your whole. I'd love to hear your whole talk when you would come to a parish. But if you had to say some of the distinctive things as a Catholic faith addresses those questions, and the contemporary reality of the complexity of medicine with all the ways that we can keep bodies alive, but the question is, are we keeping a soul alive or not? But what were some of the things you would say to help people engage this issue from a Catholic perspective?
I would actually show them a couple of the directives. There's actually a document, it's called the Ethical and Religious Directives for Catholic Healthcare Services. So it's a little pamphlet that was made to fit in a lab coat pocket.
And who put that together?
The bishops, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Came from the USCCB.
Came from the USCCB. And in this little pamphlet, there was everything. It addressed everything from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death, and any scenario that could come up. And also, it even included, how can Catholic healthcare facilities align themselves with other facilities and things like that. So it's very comprehensive.
Oh, great.
But so I would just pick out one or two of the directives and kind of pull them apart to show people that, okay, this is actually what our church teaches. Our church does not teach that you have to do absolutely everything that's available to you to stay alive. That is not what we teach.
That's not what
because people thought, I had an instance once where I did a presentation at a parish, a local parish, and I saw a woman come in with her husband and some adult children, and I was explaining about palliative care. A lot of people, this was another common misconception, was that a lot of people would equate palliative care with hospice, and then they would equate hospice with immediate death.
Right.
And so then they didn't want anything to do with palliative care. So I explained that, no, it's something that starts, it can start anytime you're diagnosed with a serious illness. You don't even have to have a diagnosis of, 6 months or less to live,
Yeah.
if that can even be done, with any certainty, which it can't really.
Right.
So this family came in, and I gave my presentation, and the woman came up to me afterwards, and she said, my husband's doctor has been recommending palliative care for him for a while, and I have resisted it. She said, but I didn't understand what it meant. She said, I'm going to call the office tomorrow and get him signed up.
What's the word palliative actually mean?
It means comfort.
Comfort.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
to make whatever you're dealing with, especially as you perhaps approaching death, comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
And even if you're not close to death,
dealing with pain.
But you have a chronic illness or something serious that may or may not be curable. Whatever you go through, whether it's physically, emotionally, or spiritually, palliative care can address those concerns.
People do have this, fear, and that's obviously doesn't understand that there are only two choices: horrible suffering or euthanasia. It's like
Right.
that's how the thing is set up, and obviously that's medically actually false. That
Right.
you can do so much
Yeah.
to comfort and relieve. We have the means to basically take care of pain. That's very rarely does it.
Right. Right.
So anyway, back to
Yeah.
so
So
back to this story.
So I was, doing the palliative care, working for the palliative care initiative, which was very rewarding and it was fun. But then the pandemic hit, and churches closed. And although the initiative still exists, and there is information that can be gotten from the initiative, from the director of the initiative, MC Sullivan, and MC and Dr. Karen O'Brien, who's a palliative care physician at Mass General, they have done a series on palliative care on Catholic TV. So for anybody watching this show, you can go to Catholic TV and watch MC and Dr. O'Brien's show about palliative care. And MC is still available to consult with people and, to send information and things like that. But my position as parish educator went away because of the pandemic. So then I took a little detour to Canonical Affairs. I was grateful that that I still had a job. They transferred me to another department, which in hindsight was preparing me for my job as a pastoral associate. Because my primary responsibility in Canonical Affairs was marriage paperwork. And it's interesting that there are a lot of people who don't understand that if you're Catholic and you want to be married in the Catholic Church, whether it's here or in Italy, Ireland, wherever, there is paperwork that needs to be done. And paperwork has to go from diocese to diocese, and that was my job. So now, instead of counseling people about health care, I've been counseling people about, don't worry, your wedding is still going to take place as planned. I promise the paperwork will get there.
And do you also deal with the annulments of that whole process?
No, the annulment process happens in the tribunal, which is a separate department from us. But
is it in Canonical Affairs, or it's a completely different department?
Completely different department.
See, I'm still getting new to the...
who's where. And,
the whole
and every diocese
complicated system
does it differently. So, it's hard to know which department to call for which thing. But then, out of the blue, in March, I got a phone call from Father Mario. I was at work. And he said to me, if you're still interested in the pastoral associate position, we are going to hire. So the former pastoral associate, Patrice Fitzpatrick.
Who's been on. I couldn't get her on this show, so I'm going to tell her, look at.
So Patrice and I actually go way back. We worked at Stonehame High together before she went to St. Patrick's. And so now I'm following in her footsteps. And I knew that she had left, and I put a feeler out to Father Mario and said, I'd be interested in this job. So it took him a few months to call me back. I kind of thought it was not going to happen. But I started June 1st, and I'm just, getting to know what my role is going to be, and getting to meet people, and I'm really excited about it. In the fall, we'll be starting some programs.
Yeah, I think I told you when we first met a few weeks ago, really, when you started, that I always thought the pastoral associate was the best job in the parish, better than the priest jobs. I mean, the priests, particularly a place like St. Patrick's, which is fairly large, it's like every day practically there are funerals, sometimes two, and so the priest has to do funeral masses constantly, and then obviously the regular mass schedule, and not that those aren't wonderful things to do,
No.
but the kind of creative edge of ministry, what I would call the more programmatic side. How do you help educate people, grow in their faith, catechize people, all the things that get thrown in your lap, but it's a wonderful ability both to do pastoral work and educational work, and I think to me it's the most fun,
Yeah,
so
it is good, and there is creativity involved, and now that with the decline in number of priests, so back in the day when I was growing up in St. Patrick's, we might have had 7 priests in the rectory, and now there's 2. And it is a big parish, and so priests and deacons are the only ones who can do the sacramental events. And so it's great to be able to have somebody else who can kind of pick up the slack in other areas.
I have a theory, I don't know how accurate it is, that one of the fruits of Vatican II was the lay apostolate. There was a real effort to raise up laity to have ministry, not just to be the pay and pray crowd, as someone said. You just go to Mass and put your money in, and the priests and the religious do the ministry of the church. But the reality that there's an apostolate, a ministry that lay people have. And actually the shortage of priests has forced the issue, which like you said, in the old days, it was either a priest or a nun who might have done the work you're doing, but now you're doing it as a layperson, and
really
I think that's a rich
wonderful.
Witness to people too, all people, because the church teaches everyone has a ministry, whether it may not be in the church, it may be, again, for most people it's in the world, but they need to see it as ministry, not as something separate from their religious life, but the expression and living out of their faith in the public square, wherever they are. Look I can't believe we're out of time. We only have a couple of minutes left, and there's so many conversations, I think maybe you will come back, I'm serious about this, I think just to talk about what the church does teach about care of the sick and the dying, and all the complexity of that, because most people, including Catholic people, never mind people outside the church, don't understand that. I think we could possibly, although it's not as much you feel, but it is marriage issues and all the complexities there. Because I jokingly say the church is the largest and oldest bureaucracy in the world. But I'm also aware it's got like 2,000 years of accumulated wisdom. It's not flying by the seat of its pants. It's really a rich theological, pastoral, philosophical, spiritual approach to everything that has to do with human life, like you said, from cradle to grave. So, when 1 minute, give me one hope and dream you have for your new job at St. Pat's.
So I just want to be able to be present to people, to be available to people, to meet them where they're at, to maybe help them with any misconceptions they have about the church. Maybe they've been away from the church or away from their faith. Not to hit them over the head with a hammer about things, but to just help them become aware of the beauties of the faith. I think that the church gets a lot of bad press, and some of it deserved, but the basics of the faith and the basics of what Jesus taught us and what he came to earth to do, that hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed. Thank you so much. I'm enjoy the prospect of being a partner with you and your ministry as you with mine as we try to renew the church and
Yes.
bring people to the wonderful gift of faith in Christ in the context of the community of the church. Thank you.
Yes, thank you,
So we'll
Father.
have you back.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you for joining us. I feel like we just skimmed across. I like to stop at all the points in your resume and have conversations about the riches of your life. But I hope you'll join us again. Thank you for joining us, and may God bless you. St. Patrick's Church, if you're in the neighborhood, is just down the street in Stonehame. And take a look at our website and see if there are things you might want to avail yourselves of, including the people. Diane, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
Father.
God bless.